crossovers, whiteouts, every page had to be perfect. Much like what Jim turns in for the budget to the trustee. I can take us down for this tour.
All right, let me just double check that this is working here. Just want to make sure, can people hear me?
I'm not gonna bore you with it now, but I had,
Talk about Jim. Well, you know,
All right,
Tigers.
get this here, make sure that it's working. Going through, because I don't feel like
Yes.
sorry, give me a sec. I don't feel like it's not showing up like I'm speaking, so. It's showing.
So she logged in?
Yeah. All right, I did double check that we got audio over there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. Let me make sure I go back to the right page. All right, so I will call this meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. All right. And do forgive me, would you be able to like create like a little, usually Brendan does that and I forgot like a sign-in sheet, sorry. Yeah. For the people in person. All right, and in the absence of Secretary Betts, who's not here today, I'll call the roll. Member Tate.
Here.
Present. Obviously, as I stated, Secretary Betts is absent and myself as chair am present. All right. So we'll go on to the next part of the agenda, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. So there's a flag over here. I'll mute myself just to make it easier. All right. We have the previous board minutes. We have the next item on the agenda would be the approval of previous board minutes. Those are posted, the minutes as recorded by Secretary Betts were posted on the website as well, so they're available. We don't have a physical copy with them today, but I would move that for unanimous consent that they be approved as recorded and posted.
Second to move.
All right, we'll make sure to get one printed out here at the end and signed by the two members here, and we'll leave a copy for the trustee. And when we have Brendan back, we'll also have him sign it officially as well. Okay. Going on to the next agenda item here. Sorry, a second. We'll go on to the township update. I know that there was an update from the Office of a Trustee. It is my understanding that she asked you to read it.
Me to read it?
Yes,
Oh,
that's, I believe, what she said in the
I didn't see that.
most recent email. If you want to read it.
You want me to read what she sent?
Sure, I can pull it up here for you.
I have it somewhere in my copious notes.
All right. I have it pulled up, so if you'd like to read the statement from the trustee.
Maybe I should. So,
Well, I have it here. You can read it off the tablet.
okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I got it here. All right.
It's very small print. No, I got it.
All right.
So I've been asked to read Ms. Tysing's comment. As I reflect on last Wednesday's meeting regarding the fire department, I was saddened to hear that any budget item I propose would be dead on arrival, and the board is unwilling to explore options that are financially stable for the long term. Specifically, at Wednesday's meeting, it was stated that no matter what I propose, meaning the trustee, the board is not interested because, quote, for political reasons, they can't be seen as working with me, unquote. This is not good government. We can and should do better for the township. Further to this date, despite repeated assurances from the Fire Association, no progress has been made on mediating a contract or coming up with an agreed upon solution for the funding issues we find ourselves in. Indeed, this is a very sad day for Wabash Township. My initial proposal has outlined part-time officer positions, see attached, and a pay-per-call volunteer model. Wabash Township should invest in the people serving the residents. It is unacceptable that our volunteers, especially over the last year, have been asked to do more and more with less. We need to come together to embrace those that help us, not use them as a wedge for a political grudge match. I understand that members of the fire department want to have a full-time staff members. I support that. Let us work together to create a fire district that equips us with long-term funding. Let us come together to provide the benefits all full-time workers deserve. We can do this. Based on feedback from the board, I have updated the documents presented at last Wednesday's meeting. The final number for the pay per call will be determined after the other line items are agreed upon. I will continue to try and come together for the best interest of the township. I welcome you to join me. An additional statement, please refer to Gateway for the 2020 annual review, 2020 fire fund budget to enhance understanding of the proposal. In bold print, if you need help, please schedule a one-on-one meeting with me and I can review all the documents with you and answer questions. Should I do the township assistance statement?
Sure.
Okay. Ms. Tyson goes on to state, township assistance statement. From 2011 to 2015, the township distributed, all numbers are rounded down to 1,000 for clarity, 25,000, 30,000, 35,000, 34,000, and 33,000, excuse me. In 2016, township assistance numbers were reduced to 13,000. This reduction in township assistance, in my opinion, did not reflect the need for assistance in our community. As such, in 2019, we worked together and removed the maximum assistance guideline per household. We wanted to assess the need for township assistance in the community. Our budget of 13,000 for township assistance was exhausted midsummer, and we began using the rainy day fund to continue meeting the needs of the community. We ended up spending 37,000 for the year. This spend occurred without any advertisement and without local social service agencies referring people to the township. I expressed my concerns that we did not have the budget necessary to support the community to the board. Specifically, I expressed to Michelle Whitbrock, the board president, that I was very concerned that the township did not have the resources necessary for township assistance in a typical year, and that it could be drastically short in economic slowdown. This concern has not been addressed to date because the global COVID-19 pandemic, an eviction moratorium, and the bevy of federal money that has been available to help those in our community that are most in need. As I have discussed previously with the board in May of 2020, December of 2020, February 2021, July of 2021, in 2020, we were able to use money from the state and federal government to cover the increased community needs due to the COVID pandemic. These programs have been administered by other third parties, and the township was not provided any of those funds for disbursement. To be clear, I am unaware of anyone that has been declined any township assistance request. Rather, the several federal and state programs for rental assistance have allowed the community to receive the aid they need in these uncertain times. This aid will end at some point, however. There will be an end to the eviction moratorium. It is my understanding from other local social service organizations, the ending of the eviction moratorium is their primary concern from a funding and assistance standpoint. We expect, based on the advice of local social service industries, dramatic increases in assistance requests when the moratorium ends, and will use the money accordingly. As such, I have tried to prepare for that reality the best of our ability by reserving the assistance funds that we have saved since 2020, 2021 to address what may be a large influx of applications in the coming months and into the next year. I do not expect the CARES Act money to continue through the 2022 budget year. Therefore, I recommend the board authorize the use of the township assistance dollars we have reserved to meet the needs of our community. As you can see from the spreadsheet from 2011 to 2019, Wabash Township's budget constraints pre-pandemic have been an ongoing issue for several years and has affected our ability to fully support our community. Based on the above, I submit that we should hold the line on our budgeted items for 2022 that we adopted for 2021, which is attached for references. This will allow us to reserve at a level near what was spent in assistance pre-pandemic and allow us to have a cushion for the uncertainty that is sure to come with later surges of the COVID pandemic. Thanks, Jennifer Tysing, Wabash Township trustee.
There's a couple of those areas that we can explore a little bit in the meeting, although obviously we're going to be a little bit hampered given that Ms. Tyson will be taking questions or participating beyond that statement. So let me pull up here the minutes again. Jim, do you have a fire department update? No. All right. Just wanted to make sure. I know that we had already received an update last week, so yeah. All right. So we had the next item on the agenda would be the follow-up on trustees' initial 2020 township assistance and trustees' office funding framework. There was the first step there was presentation of documents and or answers provided by the trustee. I didn't receive a specific outline. We could go pull up the gateway numbers. I don't know how much good that would do, other than to show what they would have been. Pull it up here. If it's okay with you, I don't think that it makes sense to just go through. All right. So when it comes to questions or concerns, I do have a couple of them. Not to try to relitigate anything, but I'm really worried, especially when it comes to township assistance. The money that we got last year and that we got through the CARES Act and that federal agencies and stuff like that are using is meant for areas related to COVID-19. So like if you lost your job due to COVID, if you were temporarily laid off, if you were quarantined, etc. Obviously that doesn't cover the entirety of need in our community. And a concern that I have is the amount that we provided since then just doesn't match the need outside of COVID, right? So those funds were available for those specific purposes. So if, for example, you needed help with rent because you lost your job due to another reason, or because, just fell in hard times or had, unexpected expenses, etc., that wouldn't fall under what the money allocated from the CARES Act would have. So that's one serious concern. The other serious concern that I hope that the trustee would communicate on has to do with, I know that we've spoken about how we expect an onslaught of requests after the eviction moratorium ends. A concern there continues to be that once the eviction moratorium ends, townships are generally barred from paying back for money from before they requested they requested assistance. So for example, if you request assistance this month, the township can provide assistance for this month, but it can't provide assistance for prior months. That's been the general guideline of our township and other townships as well, as far as I understand it. And has been the guideline of every other township I've worked with through my other work. So I'm concerned that our saving money right now won't help those people that will come in needing to pay back for money that came in prior to that. So that's a very serious concern. And I mean, I understand that we don't have as much money as we would like to have allocated for township assistance. We really are barred in that sense by the fund levy limits that the state has established. So that is outside of our control as a board itself. Another area that I have concerns myself when it comes to township funding is related to the expenses related to other employees. Right now, we have money allocated for paying other employees in the office, but there hasn't really been an effort to hire another employee. I wonder how we can best use that money, and if we're allocating the amount that needs to be for those specific areas, or if that money can get shifted to another particular line item, given that we don't seem to have a staffer. And that's a concern of mine. But I guess trustee doesn't. Well, we can just ask them into the void, I guess. Do you have any concerns or questions, or you can come up and speak?
I understand Ms. Tysing's concern and dedication trying to serve our township residents that are going to be in need. I think what would help me into determining the accuracy of that request, and I'm sure she's doing it because she thinks it's best, and I'm not determining that, is the anticipated, if I go back and look at the numbers over the last 2 or 3 years, and maybe what we should look at is the type of request. What are those forms of request that are funneled through our office that typically are not going to go to any state or federal social service agencies that now might fall on us? And I don't know if the moratorium is going to end or not. I have no specificity on that. So maybe if Ms. Tysing could find the numbers that would indicate the types of request. Is it rent? Is all those different things, utilities that go into making a township assistance, either approval or denial? And I think it would help us looking at the numbers and how much of those there were. Obviously, we're trying to help our residents, and that is one of our primary goals. And maybe it'd help if we just had some of those numbers that would give us an ability to yay or nay on that. Thank you.
Similarly speaking, as a board, we're a little bit concerned. Standard process when it comes to budget is that you get the numbers through the middle of the year. So the standard process, in fact, I know DLGF needed that information as well, and they hadn't received it yet, was that we have the information provided from January through June of the current year. So that that's part of the budget process for next year. Additionally, we've also asked that information be given on a month-to-month basis. We still haven't received financial statements for the month of June or July. So I know in the last meeting, we'd said that the June ones were due, but the July ones were due by today. We haven't been provided either of those either. So, but continuing on, based on the information up to the months that we do have, we are concerned, especially when it comes to having only provided $250 of township assistance through the beginning of this year. I know that we've seen a decrease, and other townships have also seen a decrease in how much assistance they're handing out because federal monies are available. But other townships haven't seen a decrease of that same amount. Even other townships, like for example, Tippecanoe Township, which is governed by all Republican board, all Republican trustee as well, they didn't see as much of a decrease last year. Now, I know this year they've seen less requests when it comes to that, but I don't think that it's been as little as we have right now. Now, I could be wrong. given that that's a little bit harder to quantify in the middle of the year outside of your own unit. But that's a serious concern there. We're also concerned that we've provided other information and have spoken in the past about maybe allocating funding towards other areas, including an insulin pantry, et cetera. Now, we're obviously not finalized on anything, given that no work has been done on being able to do that. And that's something that would really need to be a partnership between the board, the trustee, and then likely community organizations as well. So we'd still, I mean, speaking for myself, I'd still like to see information about that. Especially, I mean, I think we've had a missed opportunity to utilize the funds appropriately last year and this year. But seeing as we have some money saved on those accounts, we'd like to be able to see how we can expand service in other areas, given that obviously like the current limited pace of giving township assistance out is really unsustainable. And I think that there's work we can do, especially given that townships trustees have a mandate when it comes to insulin. Now, this isn't an issue that is exclusive to our township. A lot of township trustees have really not done a lot of work on that area, but we'd like to see our township do more work in that area. So that's a big part of there. I know we have about $28,000 allocated for an office assistant. It is our understanding we don't have a person working full-time right now. We haven't had it in a while. A question to the trustee would be, is the intention to have that be a full-time position, or like not necessarily just one person, but it could be two people working half-time? Like, what's the goal of doing that? Especially like, what's her plan for next year when it comes to an office staffer? I believe right now, and I'd have to double check the specific nature of that. I believe we currently have approved under Form 17, which is the salary resolution. If I remember correctly, right now we have 2 part-time office staffers authorized, is my understanding, but I'd have to double check that. But for that whole amount at the end of the day. So I'd be curious to see how that's going to be used, especially because that relates to township assistance, since one of the big jobs there is processing township applications. I know in the past, there's been concerns from staff regarding the process for accepting applications, and individuals have felt like they've been given a runaround. I've had that experience with people at work. So I'd like to streamline that process, given that staff and applicants haven't felt confident with the process, how it's been.
So I have a question about budget protocol. And
Yep.
I don't know who to ask. At the 2021 and 2022 budgeted for the salary of deputy trustee, I see that the 2022 budget is almost $29,000.
Mhm.
And the request, the budgeted for the board shows a slight increase, which frankly, I would not vote for the board to have an increase in.
Me neither.
What my question is, if the township finds that we are having a larger number of requests for assistance that are applied, do we have access procedurally to other line items that we can channel that money from? For example, 29,000 in deputy trustee that I don't know is used in 2021. Is that something that we would consider if that money is sitting there not used? Is it within the Indiana Township Association guidelines and DLGF that we could do that?
My understanding, and I'd have to double check that, so not being an expert on Indiana code, but my understanding is that you can move money within funds and or use money from rainy day funds to cover up the balance difference. Now, there isn't a strong mechanism for moving money between different funds. In fact, when we did the $500,000 transfer, that would have been a one-time transfer between 2 different funds. Now, so my understanding is that we probably wouldn't be able to move it from this particular fund to that one. So for the people listening, it's the 0101 fund, which is just general, the general fund, moving it to the township assistance fund, which, let me pull up which one it is, because I don't know the specific numbers for people that want to look it up. That would be, sorry, I'm just pulling it up here. Actually, so she didn't provide that document, so pull up what the fund number is. In a second, the computer's a little bit fast. So that would be the 101. The 0840 Township Assistance Fund. So that would be the fund that we have available for specifically for township assistance.
Yes.
Now, and I think that you have the report there. We haven't received a specific request. You just told us to look at the annual report from last year. So
Yeah.
that's available on Gateway, but we don't have physical copies of it right now. Sorry. Which for township assistance, we ended up the year of 2020 with a cash balance of about $15,000. And then we're expecting a similar movement in of about $20,000 for this upcoming year total, which would bring it up to about $35,000 minus whatever is spent, but not a lot has been spent as of right now.
So is the question that in anticipation of a larger number of applications, is that the concern that the trustee is worried about? And
That's my understanding from her statement. Now, how other townships have done this in the past, when they have this particular need, what they do is you'll come in, you get an application of you have established relationships with other organizations in the community. And so, for example, I'll give you from my workplace, my examples. Like, for example, LUM might be able to provide you $50 when it comes to rent or utilities. Different churches might be able to provide you $50 or $100. And so as a township, you would make sure to put them in contact as well and be able to cover that difference is the goal. Now, I think that in the past, what has happened with our township is that we've kind of just sent them out without really having a clear information. And we really expect them to do all of that prior to applying to us. And it gets a little bit tricky because with some particular places, before they give you money, like the Salvation Army, for example, they need to see a letter from the trustee's office basically saying whether you were approved or denied and how much for.
Yes.
So it's kind of a process that tends to be a little bit more labor intensive. And I think that that's where in the past our township has really failed our constituents is when it comes to that labor intensive part, there isn't a clear process set out for how you do that.
So and a follow-up question, I understand her concern about our residents in that respect. I'm just thinking that as I read back in the minutes from in the past, that the board and the trustee approved a maximum of $250 payment for township assistance.
Now, and this would have been, if it did happen, it would have been before my time on the board.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't found within our township guidelines any indication that the limit is $250.
So I saw that in the minutes that was approved. That was, I think, before you came on,
Okay.
certainly before I came on. So my question would be, so if we put a max of 250 per request, if it is honored, so you've got 4 requests for 1,000. So we're looking at upwards of 60, 70 requests that could be approved before we eat up our assistant line items.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if, and this is for the trustee and for our residents and for the other board members, is $250 an applicable amount in this time of need? And I'm asking out of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do other townships, and it's almost like comparing apples to oranges. We have an increased number of people coming in, the pandemic, everything has hit these people. Is $250 really Is that just a guide that we have to follow? But the minute said that was a maximum. So I'm wondering if we use that as a guide and not a maximum. And what are those, and without knowing what those requests are, I'm shooting in the dark here.
Yeah.
I don't know if somebody's saying, I need $800 to get me through 2 months. 250 won't do it. They're going to be evicted. Is
Yeah.
it for medicine? Is it for whatever those things are? I think if we had a more specific numbers and what those things related to, I would feel more comfortable saying going along with the request that Ms. Tyson has submitted. But without those numbers, I'm kind of shooting in the dark here. Maybe if we could have those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those would be documents that would allow the board to do a better job when it comes to understanding what the financial need of our residents that are applying for township assistance, what that looks like. Because I know that we haven't really seen a breakdown by categories. You can go back and like the best that we can do as board members is to go back to previous funds, to previous years and reports. Yes. And specifically try to figure out, like, based on who the payment was made to, like what those accepted applications were for. I would even, I mean, a comment from last year, for example, here is that although I understand the concern, I also know last year we had about 120 people that came to us to ask for assistance. Obviously, on any given day, not everybody would be able to qualify specifically for the assistance that we can provide as outlined by Indiana code and the rules that we have to follow. But even if we've been able to like cover half of those at the rate of 250, we would have been able to make a big dent there. Yeah. And similarly, I would expect that next year we would have numbers that reflect something yes. like that. That's about 10 applicants a month. And I've tried corroborating with previous office staffers, and that's not like that seems to be a pretty
I see from the remaining cash balance in January 2020, we had approximately $1,100 that were remaining. So we had spent maybe $14,000 in assistance.
Well, for the year 2019?
Correct.
Yeah. Plus the money that got paid out of rainy day funds.
Yes. And so we got roughly 21,000 that were received for this year. So she might be onto a good track here of anticipating a greater need with the moratorium. I don't know where that's going. So planning for the future, I like that idea, but maybe if we had more specific numbers, mm-hmm. that would allow us to help the township residents better.
Yeah, I think that those would be areas that we need to see specifically. And again, if it is indeed part of what the guidelines now state that it needs to be $250 maximum, I think that given that it's information that's available on the trustees' website as well, it needs to be changed to reflect that if that has been a decision that a previous board endorsed. So that's a big area there. Do you have any other questions specifically to either of those funds, I guess, right now? All right. Let me pull up something here. Now, going back to, for a moment, if you'll allow it, David, given that you're the only other board member, I think it would be fair to say, we've covered the information here for the Township Assistance and Trustees Office funding as best as we can, given current participation. Going back to firefighting fund in particular, I know that the trustee made a statement that we could agree on the rest of the line items and then change what the paper call volunteer number was based on whatever was left over. I have a couple of concerns there in the fact that the township is the one that allows appropriations for passes the salary resolution. And as far as I understand it as well, like the board has more control of that than the board has traditionally exercised here in Wabash Township, according to Indiana code, meaning that at the end of the day, we can draw the salary resolutions. Also, if there were to be a significant change such as that, it would have to be proposed and then put to a vote. And I'll speak for myself again. That's not the model that would work for our township. And I mean, I just don't consider things that would harm our community, and I think that that would do it. So that wouldn't be a consideration that I'm willing to make. I do think, and we'd have to verify this as well, and this is on the procedural side of things. I was corroborating with people with a little bit more expertise than we do when it comes to township government. And I think that for payments made to officers of the department, we'd have to update our salary resolution to include that information. I don't know that it's currently included on there for the payments that people receive outside of the allowances per se.
And how would we do that? What's the protocol for that?
So it would be a Form 17 and as I read Indiana code, and this would be a question for our council, the board has a more leeway and control. So like we can pass our own salary resolution at any given time.
And that's salary for
Everybody, for anybody in the township government, except for the trustee, where there are limitations to
okay.
how we can impact that. And I'll go on the record as for myself. I know we've heard from a lot of constituents about like we need to like decrease the trustee salaries to the minimum possible according to Indiana law. And I mean, I get you. Constituents are frustrated, but budgets aren't meant to be retribution. And simply because other people have acted in a manner that's just retribution doesn't mean that we should engage in kind. And so like my view on it is that, you know, if whatever happens with the trial happens, you know, at some point, either herself will be determined to be a legitimate trustee according to the courts and she's entitled to her salary, or at some point there will be another trustee. And I just don't think that it's smart for us to just go around and changing the numbers depending on who the trustee is in office. And I mean, that's just my viewpoint. So I know we haven't specifically covered that, but in my view, I also wouldn't vote to decrease the trustee salaries. Now, I also wouldn't vote to increase it or the township board members, because as you may have heard last year, if you were in tune with our township back then, I've stated that I personally don't support raises for elected officials unless they campaign on it and win, because it's really tough. You know, you're asking people to allow you, you're basically raising your own salary with the money that your constituents pay in taxes. And unless there's a clear plan and it has support and whatnot, that's just my point of view. So so like while we're here on fire, was there anything particular that you needed in when it came to fire protection, especially? If you can come up and speak if you have anything.
I think the premise of this entire budget discussion rests upon one and one entity only. And that's the debate over the use of a district. And from my reading of what monies we have available now and in the future, along with the input that I've received from Chief Lewis, the firefighters here, West Lafayette, Fairfield, Purdue, Lafayette. From all the information I have gathered, without being in any way trying to be judgmental or having a preference, knowing that other people know how to do this better than the board does, all that information that I have received and read attunes itself to not going with the district. I would ask that we consider all the available options that we have with the monies we have available and actually sit down and say, what are the benefits of the district that Ms. Tysing would like to do and the pros and cons. And it seems from everything I've gotten, from every single person I've talked to, including what Reedy Financial shared, is that the district was the least preferred option of the three. I would ask that Ms. Tysing at least be open to those options that would allow us to provide the amount of fire protection that we've had in the past, that isn't going to cost us anymore, that we actually can show fiscally by the numbers that we have the funds available, and to please consider these when we're making that request, instead of trying to find one thing that she would prefer to happen, but it may not be in the best interest of the township, the fire department, and the residents. I only ask that you have an open mind. Thank you.
Yes, speaking again as to the fire department, becoming a fire district, joining another department to become a fire territory, or other departments too. It can be more than two. Or like the third option, which is, the third option that's apples to apples, if you will, which is the tax increase based on, or like the levy increase based on exceeding growth for the community, which is the one that, we know, like the individuals in the community and with expertise in this area have been able to go through that process and have done a report of what that would look like. And our understanding is that it has a high likelihood of being accepted by DLGF. I would hope that would be something that's considered for two reasons, really. Because I think that's one of like the strongest options. It still leaves open the possibility in the future, if we needed to partner with another department, we would be able to do so on an equal playing field. Right now, as Wabash Township, we're larger than most of the surrounding departments, and we're smaller than West Lafayette, and Lafayette, which are other two adjacent departments. So right now, like when it comes to a territory or whatnot, like that's just harder to achieve because of the disparity between the different entities and units. And I mean, like the territory offers some advantages when it comes to economically, but they're similar to the ones, as far as we understand it, without having seen any reports for either what it would look like with that levy or what it would look like with a territory, because we've only seen what do you call it? We only have seen one report analysis from Reedy Financial, and that was about the district, so a feasibility study for the fire department district. And I think that going in the direction of potentially increasing our service, or like our levy, our maximum levy based on growth, would allow us to continue to grow our department in the direction that we need to, without hampering the ability to like provide other services. I know that the fire district would cut into the funding for the trustee's office, which would make it a lot harder to be able to allocate funds, especially and go through and do township assistance, which that need won't decrease in the future, given that our township as a whole is continuing to increase in population. And I mean, I know that not everybody's a fan of the township system, but that's the system we got right now. And I'd rather that when it comes to township assistance, that we continue to do so in a manner that allows our residents to receive the help they need. So just long way to say that, like, we really need to look closely at that one. And if we are to do that between January and April of next year, as by statute, all of these options are April to January, January through April of any particular year, then we'd be able to go forward from that and start receiving money allocated for that purpose in 2023, if that were to be approved. That would be a big game changer for our community, and it would be a big game changer for our department. It would allow us to improve our run times. It would bump up our ratings. It's an easy assumption to make. As you have more fire protection, you'd be able to respond quicker, have better response, and we'd just be able to serve our community better. And I mean, even when you look at as a community as a whole, being able to additionally have even stronger response times when collaborating with other units would also help adjacent units as well, including our neighbors in West Lafayette, which are part of our township as well. They just aren't served in a technical manner by our fire department. So there's a lot of advantages to that option that just are being not discussed or considered. And I think it's a strong option that would really help our community and allow our township fire department to succeed. So I'd like to see that explored further. And hopefully, if that's what it looks like it would pass. It would also allow us, with the money that's already allocated from this year, the money expected for next year, as well as the money that we transferred in and the emergency loan that we have, we'd be able to cover at current level through the end of 2023. So if we were able to do this, we'd be able to jump right in with additional money from that levy appeal or exemption that we would receive. And we would be able to continue to have the current level of fire protection that our township residents have come to expect, but it would also allow us possibly to grow it in the future as our township continues to expand. Just a side note, because I'm a data nerd, if you look at the census data, our township is really growing and booming. A lot of the areas we covered, the smallest growth was about 7.5%, if I remember correctly. Had a short conversation with Mike Dwyer about this as well. Just so you know, you have data guys in your fire department as well. And, yeah, and that's just huge. And I think that we need to be looking to grow rather than shrink our department.
So what I would like to propose with Ms. Tysing and the board is that rather than, we have an impasse, obviously, between what Ms. Tysing would like to prefer with the district and the paid per call firefighters. Obviously, the board are not experts in this type of remuneration and fiscal decisions when it comes to the specificity of these type of budget items, short-term and long-term. There is one gentleman within the state who's been recognized within the state as kind of being the guru of this, and Mr. Bill Jones, who's over at Tippecanoe Township. He does provide budget training workshops for multiple townships in the state. My suggestion to Ms. Tysing and the board is that rather than have 4 people who are moderately educated in this, we actually ask a impartial source to come in and walk us through this, because numbers are not going to lie. They're either there or they're not, and they have requirements as to what those monies can be spent for. And this goes in tune with Ms. Tysing planning for the future, which I agree with. I think if before this budget is approved, this Ms. Tysing and Mr. Jones would approve, we would sit down, hammer this thing out, and specifically look at the numbers as to, is this request for a district in keeping with the amount of funds we have available and the operational of the fire department, keeping the needs of the township residents. If Ms. Tysing would agree with that, I think that would be a huge move of collaboration and cooperation on her part. Certainly, I think the board would go with that. And if she would approve with that, I'll get in contact with Mr. Jones. Totally impartial source. He works with this in the state. And I think he would show us how to look at this and plan not only for the short term, but for the future, and provide the type of fire protection that I think we've all come to expect and see through our extremely valuable Wabash Township Fire Department. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think Bill Jones has a lot of experience on this field, and we've been consulting and asking questions to him when we have questions, because I know that that's I'm of the philosophy that no elected official has all the answers. Doesn't matter what political party, doesn't matter how much experience you have, you still got to go out and ask the questions to people that have more answers than you. That's just part of being an effective leader in government. And our hope is, and we'll see if that's possible. One of the things that we're hoping to be able to do for the next meeting is, if possible, to have Bill Jones write a presentation, especially on the impact of what that likely extension would look like for our fire fund, so that we would be able to do a good comparison of that. We had originally asked him to show up today, but given that he had a budget workshop with other township trustees, he wouldn't be able to come in today. For those of you that might be curious, the only feasibility study that the township has done, to the best of our knowledge, is the fire district feasibility study. And for those that haven't seen it, if you were to go to our website under the March 16th meeting, it's available there, what the feasibility study says. And it really showcases the impact of fire if we were to go and become a fire district. I mean, just to point it out here, I'll go through, sorry to pull this up here on the spot, trying to look at what that looks like. Now, yeah, so one of the areas where we would see a big impact, there's a couple of different like taxing units in the township. And the fire district wouldn't increase the overall taxation for the township or the or even the county over the long run. What it does, it's kind of reshuffles everything a little bit. And one of the impacts, just to highlight why that's could have some negative impact when it comes to township assistance, is right now, township would get from this type of source, we'd get about $136,000 from levy, tax levied into our community. We'd go down to $20,000, $21,000 rounding up if we were to become a fire district. Now that's a big change. And obviously, like the township would lose some of the responsibilities of running the fire department, but we'd still have other responsibilities that might not be feasible to cover under that amount. And even if it does do a significant increase right now for the fire department, it's not something that would continue to extend indefinitely. I mean, it's a modest improvement to the rate of about being able to get about $195,000, if I remember correctly, for the fire protection district for the certified shares through the end of the year, through 2025, that is, excuse me. And so that's big, but it's not necessarily big enough that it allows us to continue on going forward as our township continues to grow. I think that there's better alternatives out there. And I know we've spoken about what the impact of a maximum tax, which isn't necessarily what we would go for, but the maximum levy that it would increase would allow us to raise about 1.8 million additional if we need it to go that high. I don't think that we need to go that high right now. I'm not advocating for going that high immediately or anything of the sort, but we would be able to cover and have opportunity to expand and grow if it became necessary under future administrations as well. I think it's the without having an in-depth analysis of the three options, from the rough information that we have about the three, that's the one that makes the most sense fiscally for the township, and it's the most sense for everybody. So, yeah.
Shows the percentages
Yeah.
here.
Oh, sorry. So the appeal amount would be for about $463,000 if it were to be a 5% increase or so, which would revise the maximum levy up to $680,000. And I know that that's one number. If I remember correctly from what Mr. Lewis has said, it would even be possible to go up to 10 or 15% on the increase, but we wouldn't necessarily have to go all the way. But part of what we've spoken about, like going all the way on the increase of the maximum levy, is you max out the maximum levy, but that doesn't mean that that's the amount that you're levying every year for fire department protection. So those are some of the advantages that we've spoken about. And I know the fire department understands that that's the wiser option. And it's also what I myself view as the wiser option. And I know that we have that document. I'm hoping that we'll put it up on the website as well under today's meeting, as well as last
Is the
time's
Reedy
meeting.
financial report, is that something that we publicly shared, we can put up on our?
It's already
It's already
publicly
there.
shared, yeah. But I can move it to a more prominent location as well. So include it in the more prominent location, so it's easier to find for residents, so that they don't have to go searching through all the meetings, because that's a little bit easier. Any other comments or anything else of
Does
the
Ms.
sort?
Tyson have any other comments?
I mean, I believe she's not planning on speaking, but
Okay.
I don't know if she has or whatnot.
Next item.
All right,
And then one other comment, I guess.
you can come up here and speak just because, sorry to make it, it's just so that it's recorded for posterity, Jim. We love your voice.
I think she mentioned in there that we had not submitted a contract to her when actually we have submitted a contract, and we submitted a contract to her back in the early part of July, I believe it was. And we have not heard back anything from her as to what she would like to have different than that. And that's kind of what we're waiting on to see. We submitted what we thought would be a good idea, and we're looking for suggestions on what she would want to do differently. So we're looking forward to that also.
Does that go through Mr. Biederman, or does that just go through the trustee?
It goes through Mr. Biederman, and it goes through Susanna Justice, also our counsel.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate that, Jim. Going on to the next item on the agenda here. Let me pull it up because I keep having different tabs open.
My wife has to be joined, but I don't, do you have to approve her to get in?
Oh, yes, I do apologize. I just haven't been checking here a
Ask for
little
a
bit.
divorce if you don't put her in.
Okay, she's been added, yeah.
Please don't put her in.
Wow.
Not in the paper.
All right. So on that note, we have an opportunity for discussion or public comment and communications. I know that we have a limited attendance today, but if there's anybody that would like to make a public comment, you can come up and be recognized, or you can unmute yourself if you're on the screen. I expect that today's very dry meeting will produce many public comments. If you'd like to, you,
Yes, I've got
Welcome.
more on that, yes.
okay. Again, we're going to be graced by Jim's voice, and he is duly recognized.
In the email that she sent out that you read into the minutes tonight, one of the attachments
Yes,
that she had included there was a change in the budget statement
yes.
for the Wabash Township Fire Department. And it took out all of the figures that she had before, and basically just went with what she considers to be her option of paying the officers and paying the firefighters on a paid for call basis.
Yes.
And so it's not very complete, and there's a lot of it to be announced or to be determined
Yes.
that I think needs to be a little bit more discussion on that.
More specificity is what those numbers could be.
Yeah.
If we're planning for
I
the
mean,
future.
we went from a $300 and some odd $1,000 budget in the fire, or actually a $600,000 budget in the fire department down to it looks like about a $98,000 budget. So
Must be the helicopter.
So, yeah, so there's a couple of areas there again, speaking, and I think that Jim sharing his concerns for the fire department also shares the concerns of the board, and it's that, I mean, like, there's no specificity really, and like where it is, like, obviously last time, like, it became very obvious and apparent that a pay-per call volunteer like proposal just wouldn't get the avowal of this board. I think that's a fair assessment to state. But like, we still need information, and I just, this isn't a full proposal either. And obviously, like, the next meeting, which is September 7th, would be the time for the official budget proposal, as you know, following discussions. But I mean, on a personal level, I've just been frustrated with how this process has played out and how it hasn't. And I just think that this discussions haven't been, there hasn't been the documents and information and line items that we've asked to be provided, and the details about what expenses happened in this last year and comparisons as to what we expect for next year. It's not been a serious process, and it's just been
Missing the
frustrating.
comparisons.
Yeah, there's no comparison really. between what's changing and like
The detail.
the detail, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'll like give a shout out to my former workplace. Prior to this, I worked on a campus ministry with a similarly sized budget to this one. Just to go to show how much we're having arguments about how much money, and like budgets have a lot of specificity. Like this just doesn't meet the criteria for a nonprofit, and I don't think it meets the criteria for a government entity where we're talking about others people's tax dollars. So
We do know those line items are there.
yeah, there's no detail beyond that.
And hell, I misspoke on that, if I may.
All right, you may go up and speak. Yes, I did.
I misspoke on what I just said, and I want to clarify that because the totals for 2,000 and for totals for 3 are the same as what they were in the original budget. What she changed was the totals for the 1,000, which she had here, which had a 461,532 balance, down to about $100,000 balance. The others stayed the same.
Okay.
Right. I stand corrected.
Where did the money go?
To the helicopter. Are there any other public comments? Mr. Dwyer, you're duly recognized. I'm sorry, but your voice is just not as vibrant as Jim's. I do apologize for that.
Speak louder.
Oh, okay.
So I spoke to not everyone on the fire department, but I spoken to about half of the people in the department to see if they thought that what the trustee suggested was a good idea, the pay-per-call. No one thought it was a good idea for various different reasons. Some people didn't feel like they needed to be paid upwards of $9,000 roughly. Others felt like it didn't make any sense. And I kind of agree with this, or not kind of, I do agree with this. It doesn't make any sense to pay the volunteers when you add up all that money that got to that $365,000 was equal to what we were paying the 3 paid guys that were here, plus their health insurance, plus their benefits. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. If there's not enough money to pay them in 2021, then how is there enough money to use all that existing money to pay volunteers on a pay per call basis? So if we're going to have that money, I would prefer it to go to guys that are here, guys or girls that are here making runs. Having people here on station is, I think, a lot more key than paying our volunteers to make runs. We may see more people showing up on runs if we're paying them on a per run basis, but we're not going to be getting quicker responses because there just won't be people here. And that's been alluded to last week, is getting people out the door in a fire truck or a rescue apparatus is more important than probably about anything else right at the moment, at least for the majority of our medical runs. The other thing, and this is more of a note for Trustee Tysing, looking at the part-time positions that you've got listed, you have only got 1 deputy chief. We actually have 2 deputy chiefs, and you're missing the sergeant position. I actually completely understand that you missed the sergeant position because we don't currently have anyone in the sergeant position right now. I know that Enzi last week also talked about the quartermaster position. Again, I understand why you would have missed that. That's not an official listed officer position. The other thing I had questions about is for the 7 positions you've got, if you add all those up, they equal out to be $70,000. You've got $65,000 budgeted for those 7 positions. So that to me, I think just needs some work on your part, just to kind of figure out where that should be. Especially if you're going to add in another deputy chief at $11,000, you're up to $88,000 or $81,000, plus whatever you want to pay the sergeant. The other thing I noticed, if 9,000 is the base for the volunteer, or roughly the base for a volunteer on a per run basis, and again, that's based on what you guys estimated on the FLSA guidelines. So that would put the EMS captain, the fire captain, and the lieutenant at or below what they would make as just a volunteer. So I'm like I said, I'm not necessarily for this because it keeps us from having paid guys. But if we were going to do something like this, it does not make any sense to pay the officers at the same or less than the volunteers could potentially make. just as a thought.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that that's a big concern. And following up on what Mr. Dwyer said, I think that similarly, it continues to be a concern that paying people per volunteer run or per, pay per call volunteer system, again, it doesn't allow us to have fire protection during the times when we don't normally have volunteers here, which tends to be during the daytime. To like add on top of that, just to like explain at least how I view the logic on this. In the past, we've had a significantly smaller township. We've grown since the time Jin's been here, about 10 times the number of calls in any given year. And at that point, we were also providing medical runs. Am I correct in that understanding? So like it's been just 10 times over the number of runs. And maybe at some point, right, like, or at some point, it made sense to just have a volunteer fire department. Again, you had similarly rough number of volunteers as you did prior to the beginning of this administration. And so like distributing those volunteers and being available was less of an issue when you had the same amount of people for a much smaller number of runs. Now that you have 10 times the runs, even if you had the same number of volunteers, it would still be a struggle. And that's why the paid guys are an important addition to our department, because they cover gaps that our volunteers are not capable of due to the fact that they're volunteers and they're not full-time on this position. Yeah, so like, again, that's a big area of concern, because now we're down to half the volunteers and they're expected to cover 10 times what in the past was feasible. And I mean, I just don't see this as planning for the future. I think this is just planning for the past.
Relevant to that, I think it would be helpful if we knew the process for the application that we're going through, or the chief and the trustees going through the number of applicants. Are we getting some applications in for the volunteer fire department?
We were getting some applications in, yes.
Okay,
The vast majority that we're getting in need training.
And we don't have anybody
We
for
don't
training.
have
okay.
training.
So Chief Lewis indicated we are getting some applications in, but due to the fact that the people that could train those are no longer employed with the fire department, that would be in limbo. Okay, so we're really not getting any applications that we can process that will help our cause. Would that be accurate?
There are probably 2 or 3 that we have that already have an EMT certification
Okay.
that we are working on
Okay,
to get them onto the department so that we can at least utilize them for the medical runs.
okay,
As far as firefighter personnel, we may have one applicant that has some training, but it has certifications, but it still requires us to do at least about 40 hours of training in order to get them up to be able to operate on our.
so Chief Lewis has said we may have 2 or 3 that may come in with the medical side, and possibly one that has some certification, but may need up to 40 hours of more of training in order to get him up to speed with the level of training that he needs. So we're kind of struggling a little bit here with this process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Additionally, on that same front, although we are fortunate to have other organizations, other departments in the community that are able to do the work of continuously training our volunteers and doing that work. I know that it goes a lot easier when you can also have a person in your own staff that's able to train those volunteers and do continuous training, obviously. I mean, similar to how in a lot of fields you need to do continuous education, with firefighting, it's even more important. It's just a matter of life and death. You want to make sure that people are keeping up, that they're staying trained, that you're refreshing the necessary stuff. And obviously, like right now, we're limited in the ability to do that, even with our current volunteers, given to the absence of a person trained to train people, which would have been Drew. Am I correct? Drew Hampton was the person that was trained to do that.
Joe
Wade and Drew.
And Travis Merkel.
Oh, and Travis.
For both certified instructors.
All right, so correction, Joe Wade and Travis and Merkel were the ones that were certified instructors.
So may I suggest we move the next item?
Yep.
Agenda, please.
Well, let's just double check. Is there any other public comment that I missed? I didn't see anybody interrupt or anybody in the public, but
Even if it is unmuted, I don't know if that means she wants to make a comment or
oh, Ms. Tyson, did you mean to speak?
not. Sounds like a no.
Okay,
Sorry, I noticed that I didn't want her to get skipped, but she did want to comment.
okay. Thank you for noticing that. All right, seeing no other public comment, we have old business. The one that we'd left on the agenda after last meeting was the review of budget considerations regarding cemeteries. Seeing as we haven't seen any information come our way, I would move to table that. Do I have unanimous consent to
Yes.
table it? All right, so we'll keep that on the old business front. Future meeting dates for 2021. September 7th would be the first reading of the amended budget. For Indiana codes purposes, that's what you would call a public hearing. So the budget would need to be posted 10 days prior. And right now it's includes in local newspaper. So given who our local newspapers are, you can expect to see that in the Journal and Courier. As soon as we receive that from Ms. Tyson, whatever her proposed budget is, we'll also post that online on our website, and I hope she posts it on hers as well. After that, we have the second reading of the amended budget, which is on September 28th. That would be the first opportunity for budget adoption or rejection or tabling. And then on October 5th and October 19th, we have scheduled backstop meetings if necessary to consider her proposed budget and or changes to that, just so that the public is aware. The board cannot go over what she has apportioned for any particular amount. The board can approve at that current level, or that you can also amend stuff and decrease particular line items, but the board does not have the statutory ability to increase her proposed budget. Just so that members of the public understand our constraints and our roles as board members. Other than that, we just have the, all right, before adjournment, yeah.
So this is to all of you out there that are listening, that want to zoom in, August 28th, 11 to 3 o'clock at the parking lot with Brokerage Brewery and Pizza Hut. Nelson's Chicken is going to, we're going to do a fundraiser for the fire department. It's $10. You got half of a smoked chicken and a baked potato. We've used these guys before with the Knights of Columbus. They're phenomenal. Please come out. We have tickets available. You can go online with the Wabash Fire Department website. Please purchase tickets, $10, great time, August 28th, a Saturday. It's also beers around the Wabash, come up, Brokerage. Please support our fire department. Come out and support us. Thank you.
And you can go online to be able to get tickets at savewabashfire.com.
Yes.
And if the vegetarian can be there and buy tickets, speaking about myself, everybody is encouraged to do that in support of our firefighters. And I'll make sure to eat a lot of potatoes and share my chicken with somebody
Vegan
else.
chicken.
Oh, vegan chicken. It only ate corn. Yes, very nice. All right, so moving on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Seeing as I'm the only other member, I second that motion. And all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. All right, this meeting is therefore adjourned at 7:17 p.m. We'll see you guys at 6 p.m. on September 7th, and we hope you all have a great time.